Andrea, Jen,
Yeah, that'd be it. What about,
we're missing one other.
see, Alan's
Also,
on the screen, that's it.
yeah, Alan's on the screen.
There's 4 of us.
So we're good.
Okay,
Let's just start.
okay. I'd like to.
Oh, sorry.
Oh.
She is- I was premature. She needs to turn the broadcast on.
All right, so we should be on.
Okay.
Record.
We're broadcasting. We're trying to keep up with, town standards.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to call the March 17th, 2022 meeting of the Scarborough Economic Development Corporation to order. I think we can start with some roundtable comments right now. I'm gonna pass just because I'm gonna talk during the exemption part, but does anybody start with Kevin? Do you have anything you want to mention?
Sure. I was thinking on the way over this morning, we've had a lot of discussion, and there seems to be a lot of discussion, obviously, about supply chain and the impact of all the oil and the Ukrainian crisis, and how does that translate to construction dollars? And it's been interesting as I've been following some projects along just around the state of Maine, like the University of Maine system has put more money into the law school budget, or they're going to be voting on more budget into the law school project. And there are a number of healthcare projects where they have gone back to the state to inform them that they've increased the cost of projects. Most notably, work that's going on for Northern Light Health, the ones that I happen to see. But I think that's indicative of what's going on there for ongoing work. It's a battle to get to the budget or to come to an agreement on value engineering to be somewhat near the budget. But at the same time, everyone knows that we've been on this, one heck of a roll in the development and construction community, almost to the point where it's too much, where crews are company subcontractors especially are having a really hard time fielding talent. And a lot of companies, there's this revolving door of people going from firm to firm. There's not a lot of stability right now. And so it'll be interesting, especially now that we've had the little spike up by the Fed on interest rates, to see if there's maybe a few jobs that might get pushed off. And that might, in the long run, be really good for owners and contractors.
You say jobs, you mean construction jobs.
Construction jobs. And one thing that I find most interesting when we bring it to a public point of view is that these future projects that may be in development but that are not going to start for another year, they will likely benefit by costs coming more in line. And it's something that is actively being talked about, not just my firm, not just Maine, across the world. And so that's my main take for this morning.
I think I'm still asleep.
Okay.
No, it's just amazing. We just have a juggernaut of a local economy. It just seems like the hits keep on coming. It's all positive, but it seems like every week we have a new, fairly significant inquiry or development proposal. The council will be considering another exemption request for 300 multifamily units in the Enterprise Business Park just across the street. I don't really like the chances. I think, unfortunately, the timing is bad, just with the Downs issue dominating for obvious reasons. But we'll see how the council deals with that. Beechwood Speedway has kind of gone under the radar, but there's just massive development potential on that site. And then Karen and I will be meeting later this morning with another very large potential project on Running Hill Road. So it's really amazing how things have just continued to progress. It's somewhat exhausting return. There seems to be another one, and none of them are easy, of course. All the easy projects are, have come and gone or in the ground.
Tom, are you seeing most of the projects that come? How many? The most of them require some sort of zoning change or exemption. I mean, how many do you see that fit everything versus how many you see that need some, some sort of exception made?
Beechwood Speedway at this point, although there's some huge impediments, they need to get sewer there. But nearly any project that I've been involved with that's worth anything, that's interesting, needs relief of one or support one sort or another, whether it's contract zone modification or some sort of financial assistance. So that involves the town council. And,
yeah.
I guess that's the point I want to raise. Paul could probably confirm this. I think it's just exhausting on council. It's just they don't have time to do the business that's in front of them because there's all these external things and they all deserve time and attention. But they're all competing for that little time and attention. So it'll be interesting to see how we kind of navigate our way through this because I see opportunity in every one of these projects, but there's just not room and space and time for all of them, frankly.
And they're a little different. They're all a little different too.
Yep.
Like Beech Ridge already has industrial zoning, so zoning's not the issue, but sewer, water, other services. So
just the other thing is the Downs conversation has entered kind of the next phase. The council took action last week to, in unprecedented fashion, I'll say, kind of at the front end of our discussions with them, detailed discussions, they laid out the framework that the council could live with, the rough framework. And so the good news, that's kind of set the tone. And the council itself, and I've kind of drifted back. I'm going to let Jeff Levine, our consultant, and Dan Bacon kind of sort through, get as far along as they can, and there'll be some sticking points. So interested to see how that unfolds. I'd like to think it's several weeks, not several months, but we'll have to see how quickly things fall in place.
I don't have anything new at this point.
Alan, do you have any comments or anything before?
Oh, if you can hear me, not sure if you can or not, but I definitely would want to echo what I heard Kevin say. I've reached out to a couple of people that I used to work with, and they're basically in the same boat. I mean, they're saying that they have never been so busy. They cannot get enough help, even unqualified help, really. They're just not getting people come to the door and indicating that, they want work. I mean, they've got open positions to fill, but nobody coming to want to fill them. So that's been a real problem. The other thing, and I don't know if this is just interesting or not, but from my perspective, almost nobody is wearing masks anymore out into the public, or you go into the stores now, nobody's wearing them. It's the same up here in the Bangor area. And I just thought it was interesting that I think it was yesterday or the day before that they've indicated that the number of cases are starting to tick up again. And I just can't help but wonder if it's, the whole issue of masking, and are we starting to take them off too fast, and are we going to see another rise? But that's just more of a personal anecdote than anything else. I certainly plan on continuing to wear a mask for a while. And I'm
on that note, Alan, I think through the entire pandemic, Europe was 2 or 3 weeks ahead of us, and a pretty consistent indicator. And things are ticking up all over Europe. So it'll be interesting to see 2 or 3 weeks from now where we are. In China.
Yeah. It's just, it doesn't seem to be really, everything was looking great, right? We were down almost 85%, I think, with hospitalizations about a week ago. And it's just, things are clicking back up again. So just more of a, for what it's worth, note.
Paul, do you want to have anything to share?
Sure.
He's good at sharing.
I feel like I'm either at school or town hall. So I'm just school, town hall, school, town hall, school, town hall.
Lots of sharing and caring, right?
All right. Just to build off where Tom, the update with Tom, I think the primary focus last couple of weeks for us have been primarily trying to get a framework for all of us to operate within with the Downs exemption request. I think that there is, if we look back at our credit enhancement agreement with the Downs, it references the downtown, it references land for the school, and it references a community center, but it does so all pretty vaguely. And I think that, so we've had, I think a lot of us have viewed this as kind of the last time we're going to have an interaction with the Downs folks of this magnitude. And so I think that it's important to us to explore, can we check a couple boxes off? Can we leave each other alone for a year or 5, knowing that, some of the stuff's becoming a little bit more concrete. And I'm only speaking for myself, of course, not the whole council, but that's my perspective of where we are now. And I think that's why it's going to get, it's been intense. It should be intense. There's a lot of decisions to be made. But I think as a council, this is our time to solidify a few of those abstract ideas. And it's going to be difficult for us to move forward if we don't feel like we've delivered 1 to 3 of something for those 3 big ideas. So that's where we are. And to Tom's point, there is a lot of extra projects coming through. I can tell you from personal experience, I'm only speaking for me as a counselor, I'm going to have a hard time approving any sort of 300 plus unit conversion or new development that is outside of the Downs right now. I think the Downs itself is so large and so difficult to wrap our arms around. I think every time we spend away from trying to figure out that puzzle, we're taking away from its success. And so, I can just tell you as straightforward as possible, you can expect me not to be super welcoming to any more residential development units when we have a massive one that we're still trying to wrap our brains around. And that's hard. That's been very difficult for us as a council. And it's to John's point, when everything seems to need some sort of attention from us. By the way, that's some of our own doing. So to be fair, we're reaping what we sowed a little bit here. But that's the outlook. I mean, we haven't officially looked at the enterprise drive project. That's the 300 extra units that will be, essentially adjacent to the Downs, but it's still 300 extra units. So that's where we are. I mean, if you guys, it might be easier if you guys have questions. I'll be very open and honest with any responses. But
Any questions? No,
Not yet.
okay.
Can I add?
Yeah, please.
Just to add, as we were going around, on a local level, the Piper Shores project is really progressing out near Higgins Beach. The Mint Block project at Enterprise, they're now open, and that's down by the veterinary hospital. Terracotta Pasta is supposedly opening later this month. And I went on Saturday, Michelle and I went to Harbor Fish and Rosemont Market. I got to tell you, they did an extraordinary job of getting that space ready. I think that Harbor Fish looks like they've been there forever. It's a perfect fit. It's a very inviting space. And I was walking through going, well, there's where Mike Thurlow's office was, and there's where the jail cell was. And I do think that parking lot's awfully tight. And but they look like they've really kind of had a good opening over there. And I think it'll be interesting to see how Firehouse Village progresses. But and then the last thing I just wanted to mention is that IDEX project. They're moving dirt over there And so that has started at the Downs.
And I think, Tom, you had a tour with IDEX?
Yeah, I went with Dana Fortier yesterday,
Yeah.
spent about 3 hours with them. What an incredible facility up in Westbrook. I mean, everything from
Is it
research and
the
development
Oh.
to all sorts of production lines. Fascinating.
Mhm.
And he's on the facility side, so of course he had to show me all the nooks and crannies and air handling. And just the difference in that within those walls of temperature control, deep freeze to clean rooms, it's really just incredibly impressive facility. And what we'll see is research and development and production here.
Right. And I guess I do want to say on the public safety, the old public safety building and its redevelopment, it's one of those projects that Tom and I talked a lot about in the very beginning. Like, how do we get a project there? And do we want to be prescriptive about it and say, do a bid, do all the things that sometimes public entities do? And it's one of those times when we really felt like the town and village center zoning, for the most part, was a good fit, and we felt like people could do that. And so we talked to a lot of people in a year and a half, and I have to admit, from an economic development standpoint, I feel really, really proud of the development that's happening there. They used the building. They certainly have paid respect to its history, and I have personally tried to get out and make a left turn at 3 different times during the day. And you know what? A little bit of patience and you could do it. What happens during summer, perhaps a different story, but right now it seems doable. But
Yeah, that was difficult, but I think it's also finding the right buyer that has some vision and some willingness to listen to some of our ideas. So yeah, I think in hindsight, it was very successful. It was stressful during the time.
yes,
as I
it
recall.
was. There's a little bit of a, nervousness about, well, do we give in to, lots of people wanted to do other things with it. And anyway, so I just have to say that's one of the times from an economic development standpoint,
Home run.
I feel pretty good about it. Hopefully the community feels good. That's obviously the most important thing.
Well, certainly when you have a fish market and you've got trench drains already there in the space that you're going to occupy for washdown, I just think it's a perfect fit in that space to have harbor in that.
Yeah.
So one quick thing, just I'll add before we move to approvals, but one thing I just think of that I could mention is that 2 weeks ago tomorrow, so I guess that would have been March 4th, the merger between People's United Bank and M&T Bank was approved by the Fed Board of Governors. That was the last thing that was needed. So the closing date of that merger is April 1st, unless it's a big April Fool's joke. So as of April 2nd, initially what will happen is People's will be a division of M&T. And then sort of go on, signs won't change immediately, the branches won't change immediately, all that stuff will kind of stay the same at first. But Labor Day is conversion, which is when pretty much People's will be gone and M&T will be here to stay. And M&T will be a massive, it's still a regional East Coast bank, it's Buffalo, all New England down to Virginia, but will be by assets like the 11th largest bank in the country. So a lot of new products and capacity. So just FYI.
Do they have any particular specialties with respect to their commercial loans? Are they all different types of industries?
All different kinds.
Right.
Yeah. But we're still learning. They know a lot about us because they wanted to see a lot of our stuff and they wouldn't tell us a lot about them.
Okay.
But I think we'll start to learn now that, right after April 1st, I think when we're legally the same company, a lot more stuff will get shared between the companies. So.
Okay.
Okay, well, thank you, everyone. Next item is approvals. Do we have to do them separately or together, or
Do them together. It doesn't
is
matter.
any conversation needed, Karen, as far as you're concerned?
Just on the budget, Wanda just finished that. We're, just closed February out. We did go ahead and buy the computer, but it won't show up until March.
Mhm.
And we did do the owl so that we
And
would
that's,
not disappoint our viewers anymore. We finally bit the whatever it is that you bite. Anyway, we made the purchase.
okay, are there any questions on the meeting summary or the financial report? Alan,
Nope, all set.
have a motion to approve, seconded, all in favor? Okay, next item is the housing legislation follow-up and the proposed bill. And is that Karen, do you want to?
Sure, and I'll ask for help from anybody who knows more. So Travis and Tom may also have some comments. So the bill that I sent last week or earlier this week has been revised. I believe I sent the new version yesterday. And most of what was in the housing recommendation, Housing Commission's recommendations really have been gutted. They left the growth management ordinance legislation alone, except for exempting affordable housing, which we already did in our growth management ordinance. So on a quick read, I didn't see any change in anything that dealt with the growth management ordinance. The one thing I was a little confused about is in one section, it talks about having 4 units on a single family lot. If you've got an existing structure, you could do an interior unit and an exterior unit. And then in another section, it talks about just one accessory dwelling unit. So I'm sure there's some reason that it does that. So I'm just a little confused about that one and I need to check in. But otherwise, it provides some technical assistance. It certainly encourages communities that have not looked at accessory dwelling units to make those changes. Tom, I don't know if you.
I would say the most impactful thing that I saw in the revised legislation was as regards affordable housing units. It provides a pretty significant density bonus. Essentially, it's 2.5 times what the underlying zone allows. So really for the downs, that would be as much as 50 units per acre. That's
If they build affordable.
if they build affordable under this scenario. By right, under the zoning, they're allowed 20 units per acre. So the 2.5 times that multiple gets pretty significant. And we don't have any density that even approaches even 20, much less 50. So that causes me a little pause.
Right.
Could you say that again, Tom?
So the way the legislation is worded is that for affordable housing, it gives a density multiplier. So essentially, whatever the underlying zone allows by way of density, they can build to 2.5 times that density. So the downs by right in the CPD has a right to build 20 units per acre. This would allow them to go to 50 units per acre.
All of the units need to be affordable, though. It's not
Yeah.
like the 10% of
Right.
units being built. It's
Correct.
all of
That's
the
my
units.
understanding, yes.
Yeah.
Yep. And the definition of affordable was in line with how we defined it. So I think there's good alignment there, but that piece, just caught my eye for sure. And obviously to do density at that scale, you're going vertical and high.
Right, and there certainly are provisions with respect to services. They have to prove that there's, either sewer connections or other types of connections depending on the density. And so, other than that, I'm not sure how it would affect us really all that much. So anything that was a major change based on the Housing Commission is is out. This is still not the final bill from what Tom says and what everyone else is saying.
Said anything that was a major change is now out.
Yeah.
Yeah. They really listened to the home rule concerns and I think made changes accordingly. It's interesting that, I don't follow the legislature very often. Travis is a student, I'm sure. But it strikes me that there's
We
some
get to
really
link to
interesting
Andrea.
stakeholders
We get to
from
link to
all over
Andrea.
Yes,
the
I'm just,
state that
but
have
she's
been
not
involved in this
responding.
conversation.
Oh, okay, okay. Just want to make sure to send it to
Maine
okay.
Chamber and Portland Chamber on one side, and municipalities in MMA, and then the development community. So it's an important discussion, and I think the background to this and the purpose behind it makes sense, because without something like this, maybe not this, but like this, we're not going to move the needle. It's just, we're not going to be able to make significant inroads into this housing challenge.
Hey, Tom,
And
Yes.
I'm just wondering if that affordable housing issue might be something that the Downs could utilize to help with the extra units that they're looking for. And also help us as a town in terms of our affordable housing.
It could, although as Karen mentioned, our current growth management ordinance exempts affordable units. They don't need growth permits. And so you're right. I think the Downs would see that as a huge boon potentially. So it's just wrapped up into the heated discussion that we're having locally.
Yeah,
RGMO,
And the definition of affordable housing. What is affordable housing?
Well, again, this legislation defines it and their definition is consistent with ours. So there's no
Okay.
disconnect there.
RGMO doesn't have the same limit on affordable units as it does
No,
market units.
they're exempt.
they're exempt entirely.
Oh, did not know that.
Yeah.
And then that, intentionally is to provide an
Yeah.
incentive for
Yeah.
mobile units to be built out.
And the Downs is the only zone that has a requirement to do 10%. In the other zones, we've treated that as a density bonus.
Yeah.
And with the Downs, they have a requirement to do the 10%.
Yeah, and more often than not, the developers will do the pay the in lieu fee and
Yeah.
not provide the units. It's just,
Exactly.
if you're not in this business, it's really hard to do it well.
Yes.
So that's where that stands. And I can't remember. I think I sent did I send everybody the link to the Marita, the rest of the legislation
Yeah.
that they're
Yeah.
following. So, and I noticed that the amendments were presented by the speaker, who submitted the bill in the first place. So he has to be on board with the amendments. So yeah, the commission certainly laid out some bold moves, and this ordinance takes some baby steps, and for some other communities they're major steps. It's just not really that much relevance to Scarborough, since we've really done a lot of these things already.
And when you think that, like, the city of Westbrook, they are, openly looking for density, allowing for, going up higher with their developments. When you think of like the affordable component of Lewiston or Bangor or Portland, you can see where some of that is needed and would apply to these
Right.
changes, whereas the suburban communities, maybe not so much.
Sure.
Biddeford would be another one.
Right. And I did just happen to look at last night the, where we are with multifamily in terms of percentages. And I know that, really about half of the units that were permitted over the last 10 years have been multifamily. And I'm defining that as 2 or more units per structure, not necessarily the 5. But, we're still, in 18 to 19% category, even with all the new units added. And I think we forget that, like, Westbrook is 40%, South Portland is 40%. The city, Portland is 56 or 58%, something like that. So even with the new units added, we're still, again, we're primarily a single family.
But I think the
area.
difference though is that those older communities, those have been built over centuries. And we're seeing this all happen, it happened 25 years ago with those 2 big projects and then nothing. And then all of a sudden, the last 3 years, we see all of it. And so that's really what's fueled this important local discussion. And it evokes, I'll say, the conversation around is rental the same as home ownership and what's better. So there's just a lot of other issues wrapped up into that. And frankly, our community's changing. It's not the single families, cul-de-sac suburban community anymore. And it's all happening real time right in front of us.
Yeah, and we always have to remember to check in with what people are, what the definitions are, because I think sometimes, depending on which set of definitions you're looking at, are you defining multifamily by the structure? Are you defining multifamily by the way something is sold? And those are two different things. So in this, every time you're talking about units, we're really talking about the structures. But still, again, it's an important distinction that sometimes gets us confused. And that not all multifamily is rental either. Obviously, lots of multifamily is sold as condo. So that's where we are on that, and I don't think there's really anything to continue to follow really on that piece.
Most likely will pass, right? You know what I'm saying?
I think so.
Yeah,
I
as
mean,
it
it
is
came
now.
out with a bipartisan majority.
Yeah.
I think it's likely to pass. But they stripped out everything that's controversial.
Right, exactly. I mean, there is some, there's some technical assistance, but even that I was hard pressed to figure out what we would use it for, because our ordinances are pretty advanced with respect to some of these types of things.
Was this, I know these were the commission's but was this Fecto's bill that he talked about at Marita?
Yes.
It started as.
I think he was the impetus behind the commission and then readily adopted their.
Yeah.
Their
Okay,
recommendations.
so that's,
for
I
this
just
law.
didn't know if they were two different bills or.
But I think after that first day of testimony, like a marathon, 8 hours of testimony, he was quoted as, there's some middle ground here, and then you see this version. So I think he appreciates that. Getting meaningful done, you've got to
Like in a quarter ground.
moderate.
It was a big, I mean, you took a lot of control away from towns in that bill. That was gonna be some pushback.
Yep.
I don't want to say, I mean, I don't want to say as young as being a bad thing, but I think I think he was pretty ambitious,
You probably have to be to get any meaningful done.
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
That's it. I think that goes off our agenda, and
Okay.
I don't think we even need to follow it anymore. Hey, Andrea.
My apologies. I had to go get tested this morning, so that's the joys of my life right now. So my apologies.
It's all over with. It's not, right?
It wasn't worth exposing all of you guys to it, so here I am.
So the next item on the is just more discussion on the Downs exemption, and it was sort of a couple things happened sort of very quickly last week, just because of some timing issues. But before we get to sort of the statement and the council meeting and everything, Kevin, I believe, moderated an event last Tuesday night, and we were hoping you could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, it was the Scarborough Community Chamber of Commerce and SEDCO. They put it on, and it was me asking questions on behalf of the business community to Dan Bacon and of the Downs. And I think we had about 25,
That's great.
Yeah, a little bit less
People-
than that, but.
a little less than that.
Because I think that's about how many registered, but not everybody showed
Okay.
up.
And, but one thing that I did notice as we were going through the conversation, there was representation of the Eight Corners business community, Oak Hill prominently in the discussion, and also Dunstan. So it really felt like those, outside of those businesses outside of the Downs were really the ones that were taking part in the event and were asking a bunch of questions. Some that were submitted beforehand, some that were happening during the event. We had made up some questions just in case we had to go that way, but we didn't have to go that way. I mean, it was pretty active the whole evening. with the questions coming in from the business community, which I thought was very good. And I think that was probably the biggest takeaway for me. The other was the much talked about rendering that looked like a drone shot of the downtown looking towards Higas Parkway. And in that, it showed the approach, and Dan Bacon spoke to, and for the first time, it was the first time that I had seen it shown that way. A hotel, a brew pub, and a couple of other lots coming from Higas towards the downtown. And correct me if I'm wrong here, but at the end of January, Scarborough the Downs got planning board approval for the swath of land from Higas goes in. I forget what it is, but it crosses a wetland, and it basically starts the process of the road going up to the downtown center. And so it caught a lot of people's attention, that rendering it kind of made it feel real. And then I heard, hey, by the way, take a ride over on Higas, and they are cutting the trees down to create that road right now. And they're also starting to cut the trees inside, like kind of adjacent to the downtown area, going out to meet it. But the work that's approved is just that first, I forget how long, Tom, but it basically creates 4 lots, I believe.
Yeah, it's intent, there's a number of reasons that they're driving that now. I think that is that connection is absolutely key to the downtown. And one of the pieces that activates the downtown, they believe, is a grocery store tenant, which they've had very productive discussions. But I think this is a bit of a nod toward, we're actually committed to this. This is going to happen. But I think more importantly, the timing of that road, the regulations allow them to cross Millbrook, the stream, only certain times of the year. And so they want to be able to do that in this regulatory window. And then presumably later in the year, or whenever it's feasible, they'll complete it to the Scarborough Downs Road. And then I guess the final piece is that does open up other development opportunity that doesn't exist today. So if they build that road section, they can start to market the hotel site and some of the other commercial sites. So yeah, that's number one priority for them.
Yeah, and that was the other big thing that caught my attention. And since then, just in discussion, what was it, 2005, that the Scarborough Town Council made the decision to put those utilities into the Higas Parkway. Right in that time, it was in that time frame, and a lot of people kind of that raised a lot of eyebrows over the years, but that's what's gonna deliver everything. That's what's gonna deliver everything up that road.
Yeah.
And so I think in hindsight, maybe that was a wiser decision than maybe that council got credit for.
But a painful waiting period, but it's finally starting to do what I think it was, or at least some alternative of what it was supposed to do.
Yeah.
Kevin, were the questions that you got, could you sense from the questions themselves a positive tone or a negative tone from the business owners? Or were they real, just,
Well, wary with a capital W.
Yeah.
On behalf of Oak Hill.
Yeah.
Are they getting something that I'm not going to be able to get in terms of an exemption? And the answer to that was, and Karen answered it, is that no. Everyone is allowed to come for an exemption with the town council. I think that
the reality is, the Downs is the first, and
They might take all the air out of the room.
yeah, so we do have, I think, some more work to do in that area, because the answer to the question is technical that we gave that night is everybody, other people can apply for the exemption. The Downs is the first, and the Downs is the first going through our new process as well. But I do think that there's more work to be done on that. Essentially, it was about, what happens when Oak Hill wants to do, some additional housing. And there are some infill lots, Alpha Management did a nice little infill housing project last year before.
But presumably, many of those can happen within the
Yeah.
context of the GMO. They don't need an exemption. That's the
Yeah.
hope. But
Yeah.
I think the beauty of the process that we built allows a project to come forward to be viewed on its merits and make a decision based on its merits. So I would say everyone is at this point able to make the same request. They just need to make the compelling argument.
Yeah, but I wouldn't say that was the only one. I mean, all the rest of them, I think, were really kind of just asking about the project. But there was that one question from an Oak Hill business person about, can I get one too?
Is this
Basically.
a developer? Like, 'cause
Landowner,
they were at
property owner.
property owner.
Property
Okay.
Maybe
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And
And it's absolutely a fair question, like how does
course.
this work, And I think that's one of the things that I think we need to encourage the Downs to be, their focus has been on the council and the residents. But I think what we're trying to point out to them is, you know what, you need to do some reach out to the business community as well, because these are going to be your partners. And the downtown village center, whatever we want to call it, our concept, I think from a town perspective, is that drives people not just to the Downs, but, to Oak Hill. It's, the rising tide floats all boats concept. And we need to have them be better about espousing how that might work.
In hindsight, I think we've done a disservice calling it a downtown. I think it's confused people, maybe angered or frightened people. The downtown committee had a lot of conversation that this is not intended to replace what we have. It's to supplement and augment. But I think it gets lost very easily and understandably. I've been thinking about it. I wonder if the better way to characterize what's happening there is, I think what we're doing is building, the seventh village in town. That's what Scarborough was built on. It's just a modern village, and amenities around it.
Right.
I think that when you said that at our last meeting, I walked away going, that is really what it describes. And I can't help but, and I mentioned it when I was moderating the event, what's going on down at Dunstan, in the Dunstan area, where Elliot Chamberlain can go to the planning board and very quietly go up and say, yeah, we're going to be putting up 3 more buildings right off this year in this calendar year. And the planning board says, okay, yeah. And they've got to go in and give a little more detail, but they're going to be putting in 2 two-story buildings across the street from Dunstan Tap and Table with a pavilion in between them. And I don't think most of the town knows it. And, but it's going to be commercial development.
But Dunstan's a great example. It almost has all the amenities to be kind of self-sufficient for those of us that live on that side of the marsh. But it also has enough other attractions that other townspeople will, have the need or the interest in going there. And I think that's what that's what I'd love to accomplish now, just to have obviously things to support those that live there, but also things that attract the rest of us.
And there's going to be regional draws as well that hopefully if we get people here, we can expand their horizons a bit too. But like I said, we talked about it a little bit last time. I don't think anybody really wanted to call it a downtown. I mean, I remember having a meeting with the Long Range Planning Committee before the tip went to the council. We had that discussion, and Susan August said, don't call it a downtown. And, it was one of those things that we were sort of forced into it because of the legal definition of that particular tip. But it was nobody, I don't think, was ever particularly comfortable with that terminology. So it's there for a reason. Matter of fact, we had that.
Thank you, Tom.
I don't know that Tom knows this, but I had that discussion with our attorney, and she's like, call it a downtown. You need to call it a downtown because that's what the legislation says. I'm like, okay.
And it's carried through.
Yep, exactly.
And it just made me think, because I looked this morning, and of course the Cornerstone, Mark Maroon's Corner, 2005. I can remember when we were in conversations to develop this project, and everyone says, no one goes below Oak Hill. You're too far away from Oak Hill. And, here we are 17 years later, and there's a lot south of us.
Well, I have to admit, I think part of the strategic plan, when we start talking about it, this understanding of the economic development consequences and opportunities of these multiple villages and how we integrate them and how we paint a branding picture for the town is really within, that's SEDCO's, charge. That's one of the things we really need to be focusing on and making sure that everybody's feeling equal attention to the extent we can. It may not be equal at the moment, but over time, equal attention to these commercial areas and help them make some distinctions between the areas as well. As we always said, there's a reason we developed in villages. Part of it was, because we have a marsh that basically laid a hand down, in the middle of Scarborough. So you had the villages developed to serve these areas that were geographically separated. So we have a perfectly, historical reason why these villages developed. And we can respect that and continue to weave a story that benefits all of the villages.
That was one of the things Karen and I did that signage project 10 years ago now. And we try to be mindful of the village, the historical village context. And so I think you'll see at the different locations that there's a kind of historical reference. I'm not sure if anyone really appreciates it when they're going by 50, but are we talking strategic plan now?
No, sorry. I jumped into that. We've got,
We've got a couple more things on
Yeah.
the exam. So thank you, Kevin,
Yeah.
very much for doing that as always and for talking about it today. I just wanted to give kind of a brief summary of what happened last week. At the end of our last meeting, Travis and I offered to meet to sort of start developing some language in favor of the exemption. And this had been right after a council meeting where there had been some concerns presented, and we sort of went into it thinking that maybe we could try to, address those concerns, that could be an approach. We ended up inviting everyone on the board to join us. Some people did. And so this was last Wednesday was when we spoke. And the only sort of wrench that got thrown into everything was the night before, Karen alerted us that there was a resolution that the council was going to take up authorizing Tom to begin negotiation. And there was a number presented. So we had a very good conversation, all of us, about the exemption. But as we kept going and we were thinking about what we wanted to do with the limited timing that we had before literally that night, we ended up just taking an approach where all we wanted to do, at least for that night, was support the council's beginning negotiations. So all we did was we created a very brief statement that I was going to say in person. I ended up just emailing it because I don't think they ended up having comment. So I just sent it to Tom, and it was
The chair did read it.
Yep,
into the record,
yep,
so.
that's what Karen said. Yep, so it was read, but all it did was say that we were very supportive and appreciative of the council's willingness to begin negotiations, and we encourage that. Again, that was basically because I think that was a sort of condensed version of what we had initially planned, but again, it was due to timing. We were meeting Wednesday at noon, and the council meeting was Wednesday at 5. Now, going forward, I think nothing needs to change. I think nothing needs to change from our original idea. I think there is going to be this negotiation. As Tom said earlier, we're not sure how long it'll last. I do think that we can continue to be involved if we choose to. I think we can continue to answer questions or concerns that come up. Having said that, I think we would look for Tom and Karen to tell us how we can be most helpful. I certainly wouldn't want to do anything to hurt the process. But again, a little bit short, a little bit less than I think last week, I think we did a little bit less than what we had initially thought because of the timing, but I think going forward, we can continue to do that so long as that it's helpful.
No, I think this is exactly the right play, given where we are. And I fully expect there to be a fully developed plan that the council will have in front of it. I fully expect them to kind of draw out the process intentionally. So there'll be ample opportunity and something for you to review and react to. And I'd be disappointed if SEDCO didn't have some comments or take a formal position once you see the full package together.
Okay.
Did we lose Paul?
I think so.
Oh,
Yeah. Okay.
I was gonna ask
Gonna
him.
have, yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
Give us,
He's there, but I think he's just muted.
oh, Paul, could we ask you to perhaps comment on,
He's probably teaching a physics.
oh. Do you have any thoughts with respect to the workshop and whether or not the council felt like, did they care that we supported what they were doing, or again, we're trying to thread that needle of being supportive of the council and encouraging economic development. So we walk a fine line sometimes, but we just want to know what the council's perception is of general advice from from us and other advisory committees.
I'm afraid he's not listening.
Okay.
Well, I can say only one counselor expressed frustration, not specifically with SEDCO statement, but it was, I think the reference included that. That we're getting kind of ahead of ourselves, and that and I was accused of being a vocal advocate and talking to outside groups that will ultimately support this. But that was a single voice on council. I do not expect that was necessarily representative. Again, I think it was a perfect play. You'd be remiss not to
Right,
have all
there's
this
Paul.
conversation.
Hi, Paul.
Paul.
Sorry.
Paul, you're muted.
Okay.
Sorry, guys. I'm at school, so I had a student walk in to get some help. So I am.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, right.
Kids.
No,
Was there a question directed at me?
there was.
right.
So, I think what we're talking about, the exemption resolution that you guys discussed last Wednesday. And I think, the question or the stance that we took was trying to say, listen, we're not trying to get involved in the negotiation. We're just happy you're starting. And that we just want to say, good job. But we just want to make sure that that's helpful as opposed to anything else. I mean, we walk that fine line. We want to be advisory to you because that's our job. And in this case, the advice was great, go forth and negotiate. But you just never know how people perceive these things. And it's something that we're going to talk about later, when we make the decision to provide advice, when we haven't been asked.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think, that it's difficult when there's prepared statements by an agency like SEDCO or the Chamber of Commerce, everybody that's involved in those become faceless, right? We have this, and I fully am aware of, your role is to advise, and Karen, obviously we use the services all the time. But I think when we're up there as elected officials, and this strikes me probably harder than most counselors because I'm a small business owner, right? Is SEDCO is made up of, I think there's 7 or 8 of us in the room that are residents of Scarborough, and we own businesses. And those voices get a little bit lost when there's prepared statements by one organization, right? So we have residents that are, that express concerns about growth, and residents that express concerns about their tax bill, and all very legitimate concerns. But then we have, if you tend to be a resident that is more involved, so this is the irony of all this. If you tend to be more involved in any committee or board in this town, your voice gets lost and we just get these prepared statements by groups. And those don't resonate with emotions as much as when you have residents that are standing up at a podium that say, hey, for instance, I'm a small business owner. My business is in the high growth district. I benefit, Paul Johnson, business owner. I would appreciate more customers. I've seen that there's a drop in enrollment in our schools. There's fewer students that I can access, right? All of that actually doesn't matter to me right now, but that's just an example of that gets lost, right? And as a business owner, it frustrates me that our constituents all the time appear to only be the person who is struggling paying their tax bill, which, trust me, weighs on us more than anything else. So let me be very clear. That is very, very important. But what is completely getting lost is the fact that we have hundreds of small business owners that make their living in this town with businesses in this town, and your individual voices get lost. And it's unfortunate because you get, and by the way, this is not independent of SEDCO. This is any other committee in this town. If you're on the conservation committee, right? If you're on the recreation committee, if you're on SEDCO, if you're on Chamber of Commerce, all of that work, all of those hours, and you as a resident gets kind of lost in these prepared statements by organizations. And they're usually dispassionate and they're usually logical. And when you're worried about your residents, unfortunately, that doesn't resonate when you're in the context of public hearings and public feedback. So I guess I would encourage everybody that if you're a resident, get up there and speak as a resident. If you're a business owner and the person next to you is also a business owner that doesn't come to these meetings, get up there and speak as a business owner, because I think we have a big blind spot on the council. And as a business owner, it's frustrating because we don't ever talk about the impacts as us trying to make a living as business owners in this town. And so that's my pitch. I don't know if that's exactly what you're asking, but I'll take the time to say it because it is very real. And I really hope everybody hears what I'm saying, because we need to hear from residents. And you guys are all residents. So.
Well, and I think I'm going to speak for the board for a second, because I want to, if somebody doesn't want to speak up on this. And I think one of the things we try to do is thread that needle and not be, not provide that emotional piece, but to say, in general, here's the impact on the business community. And, what we're seeing is, and what we've said when we've taken stances is we've said, you as a council have a whole lot of different views that you have to take into account. We're going to give you an economic development perspective, and we want to focus on that. And I think we've deliberately tried not to be play to emotions, because we feel like that puts you in a bad position. So it's an interesting perspective to hear that. So I guess I'll let others speak.
And just to be clear, I think what I just said is not aimed at SEDCO. I think it's aimed at the individuals that make up SEDCO. And by the way, it's the individuals that make up every committee we work with, right? And there's literally hundreds of volunteers in this town that are very much aligned and very much care about a lot of stuff that we do. But those individuals, we very rarely see the individuals. And I just don't think that's fair to you individuals as constituents. That's all. I'm not suggesting SEDCO will go off the rails and try to do hellfire and brimstone, right? that's not your role, right? And
right.
You guys,
I appreciate that. I mean, look, one way I react to that, and to be honest, this might even go somewhat into strategic planning, because what I kind of hear, and if I'm way off, Paul, I apologize, but what I kind of hear is, I'm not sure that a message from SEDCO is not helpful, but I think what he might be saying is that a resident getting up and saying how it impacts them personally might be more impactful.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that leads to me is, sure, I do think it helps the board, it does exist, and I think we should be able to take stances on things and let our opinion be known. But maybe when these things come up, we start reaching out to residents or business owners and say, we're trying to get people to this meeting to speak. And that's something we can do. And that's another way that we can help, you know?
And I'm gonna be really honest, I feel like if we did that, the council would be like, what are you doing, rabble rousing individuals to come up and, you know,
That's
give us
Paul's middle
help.
name. Paul
Yeah.
Rabble Rousing
So-
Johnson.
So I feel like, you know, we thread that needle, but, you
No,
know,
I
if
think-
that's really what needs to
I
happen.
think Paul's observation is spot on,
Yeah.
is that these kinds of statements
Yep.
or statements from organizations almost get dismissed, like, oh yeah, we expect, you know, all right, thank you, move on. Whereas someone making an impassioned plea might catch a counselor's attention and they might put a lot more stock in what they're hearing on a personal account. And I don't know how to correct that.
Yeah.
I think you need to take official positions certain times.
Yeah, but at the risk of being, and just another point to this, you know, it's like, well, if the council has these advisory boards, shouldn't you don't have to agree with the advice, but I would think that that would be important for you, is to have, you know, and it doesn't necessarily mean SEDCO, it's anybody. And I would say SEDCO is very much a, you know, a town-driven organization, you know, really, as opposed to the chamber. So I think we take more into account. But regardless, the transportation committee, all these other committees, we're advisory to you. So yeah, it feels like it's both. It feels like we have
That's
to do
something
both.
that's something that I've been trying to wrap my head around for the last year or so, which is how can we more effectively support the council in our role as advisors to you? Because I understand that it's so much more effective to hear from somebody who's personally living the challenge and to hear from a bunch of them. But then it's also really effective to hear from the coalition or from the experts to come in and say, all of those passion pleas, this is what we think will work to fix it. This is our guidance to you. And if a letter from us doesn't get that message across, what's the better way to do it? Is it more commonly calling us in and having us meet with you? Is it us sort of endorsing Karen being more enthusiastically supportive of certain things if we vote for that, rather than just having her provide information? How do we be useful to you in ways beyond a letter, recognizing that we should be useful to you?
And it could be, Paul, you're saying that you need both. You've got two separate things.
Yeah, I mean, I guess so if we take, yeah, I guess all I'm saying is we need both. And I think that, you know, to Tom's point, and I don't mean to sound flip, because this is going to sound flip, but well, no kidding, you know, SEDCO is going to support the development of the Downs, right? Well, no kidding, right? And so you guys should, right? But economic development is not, and this sounds bad, but it's just a reality. And economic development's not at the forefront of our decisions once we get to a certain point. That is just a reality, right? So for example, if we look at the downtown, we've had a downtown committee. We had a dozen people on a downtown committee put hours of their work in. And there's some pretty easy takeaways from the downtown committee, right? We need people. We would like open space. We need a civic use. There's all sorts of, those are like givens. There's also some facts that are undisputable, right? We know that the drain on our services is less in multifamily units. Maybe our model isn't perfect, but as our consultant says, it's not an order of magnitude wrong. It is, you're not going to get these things perfect. So the facts have been, at this point, the facts have been stated. And if the facts are in dispute, then I can't help people that don't accept facts at this point, right? There's not much we can do left with that. But so now we're on decision, right? We're on the decision end. And the decision end really comes down to, for us all of the time, do we feel like the residents of our town want this? And that's where we are now. We're not really, in my mind, where everything else is done. Everything is done. It is very clear that in order for a downtown to thrive, we need X, Y, and Z, right? It's very clear that there's all those givens, right? But now we need to know if the residents need this. And so then we have these committees that are made up of, let's say, 150 people in town. In their mind, they've done their work. And unfortunately, they're right. That should be enough. So all of those residents kind of disengage once it's decision time because they've done their work. And we don't see that pyramid of 150 people that actually showed up and did work, right? We don't see it. And so all I'm trying to make a plea to, and I'm actually not trying to advocate for or against anything here. I guess what I am saying, as a guy who came into the council with hellfire and brimstone, that's all we see. And there is what is wrong with wanting nice things. We don't have anybody that ever stands up to the podium and say, I would like nice things, right? And so we live in an incredibly affluent town. We have a lot of ability to make a lot of exciting things happen, but we do not have residents that say why they support things. And I get that, because if I was on a committee, I don't want to show up to the SEDCO meeting. I'm exhausted. I did my work last night, right? So like if I was one of these committee members, I wouldn't want to show up to council. And I know it's kind of comfortable. If I was on a committee level, I'm there because I don't want to be in the council. I don't want to be in all that political crap storm all the time. But sometimes it's important for some people that serve on committees to just dip their toe in the crap storm so we can get a better understanding of the town holistically.
Let's make sure that goes.
Well,
in
you
the
know,
minutes.
it's interesting what you're saying, Paul, because, so anyhow, you guys know what I do for a living. Dover, New Hampshire has got an RFQ out right now for a sports complex. Very similar to what they want is like almost exactly what we want in town. And I was on that community center committee, as were you, Paul. And I found myself being quiet in those meetings because I was really taken by the other committee members. I mean, there was a lot of talent on that committee, as I'm sure you saw on the downtown committee. And what came out of that community center committee was there's a lot of money that goes out of Scarborough for travel basketball and all these different programs. And there's an opportunity for people to not have their kids have to travel out of town to do their, to do their practices. There's the high school hockey could have a place in town. I mean, there's a lot of benefits from it. But you're right, Paul, the committee gets done. It's hardly heard after the pandemic. Yet all that work really kind of supported why it really would be a good thing for the town.
Right,
and
And
over a broad range of issues.
right. And guess what we got right now? We got a big cup of nothing right now. We got all sorts of nothing in this town, right? So, and so all of that work you did, we have counselors, myself included. I am including myself. We have counselors that now a year and a half removed say, well, we don't know what we want for a community center. Like, so we just took all of that work you guys did, all of those hours. And yes, what we came up with that community center was, it was huge. It was too big, I think, and that's fine. But there is so much groundwork that was laid. There is so much good information. And we're at the podium, we're behind that desk saying, oh, well, we got to, we don't know what we want for community center. So now if I was somebody that was on that community center committee, I'd be discouraged, right? I would be discouraged because in my mind, all of that work didn't happen. And we say we want volunteers, but we keep running these committees, and then those committees still end up with our cup of nothing, right? And so, man, at some point, we're going to get people stop wanting to volunteer on these committees. The school building committee, we're in our second iteration of it. We're going to do it all over again. The downtown committee did a bunch of work. There's possibility that we end up with nothing there too. And so that if I was on those committees, I'd get a little mad. That's all I'm saying, right? So if we want a little hellfire and brimstone from you guys, I'd be a little mad that people put in hours and the voices are getting lost. I mean, because that's what's happening. Okay. And again, I'm not even advocating. I'm just saying I would like to hear from residents more. That's all. And I think we all would, and we could all appreciate that. So
Okay.
I apologize for the rant. I hijacked your meeting. I'm
No,
No,
Paul,
no, we needed to hear this.
Paul, thank you very much. I think that's actually very helpful to hear. Just. we've got
John?
50 Yeah,
John, is it possible I could ask Paul one more question?
sure.
Paul, if I go up to the podium at a council meeting, would it be better if I represented myself only as a resident, or the fact that I am on other committees in the town? Should you know I'm on a committee, or just be a resident?
Thank you for asking this, and I cannot overstate this. Just a resident.
Okay.
I just want to know what Alan thinks. I that's all I want to know. And of course, it's
That's a
going to be.
revelation. That's a revelation, I think, for us. So that's good to know.
Yeah,
One council.
Right.
It would be helpful if you pounded your fist on the podium when you spoke. too.
Right,
yeah.
right, right.
I want my downtown, I want it now.
There you go.
My village.
But I do want to, we have sort of one more piece from this item that then kind of goes nicely into the strategic plan update from Andrea. And I just want to make sure we have we have about 15 minutes left. I want to make sure we have enough time to talk about that. So one of the things, I believe it was Travis who brought this up during our meeting about the exemption, was, as we look at this exemption request, and like someone said, there's already another one at Enterprise Park, and there will assuredly be others, and not just housing exemptions, really, I'd say we talked about all the different requests that are now going before the council for zoning changes and exemptions and TIFs. I mean, it's crazy. How do we maybe develop a framework for what we do and don't support, or what we what we want to get involved in? And it really brought up a good discussion. I think Alan had a good comment, as because it was said, do we come up with a list of benchmarks, a checklist? And Alan had some questions, so almost from a legal standpoint. So what we obviously weren't going to come to an answer last week, but what we really thought was that kind of comes in nicely as we are doing the strategic planning. And I think we're going to have the strategic planning workshop next month, and Andrea can talk about that. But what we thought was that was a really good topic for that, which is, with all these different requests coming before the council, sort of how are we going to decide what we're going to focus on? And again, obviously, if you look at this exemption for the Downs versus the exemption for Enterprise Park, I think they're a little bit different. A lot is riding on this exemption for the Downs because of the Downs project itself, whereas a standalone multifamily project, I don't think has the same implications. But I think so that came up. I don't know if Travis, if you want to just say something really quick about it, and then.
Sure, I think everything we've talked about today is proof that we need something like this, because in the new world we're living in, with the GMO and with the intense interest in Scarborough, we're gonna get asked to comment a lot, and we've done it once. And I think it's going to speak more loudly when we don't now than when we do. And so we need to be able to say clearly how a project goes above and beyond a building and maybe some jobs, that it reaches a point where we believe it's actually part of the economic development plan of Scarborough. It's a value for us to weigh in. So we're not saying, yes, good project, no bad project, or yes, we like that, no, we don't like that. Where does it fit into our strategic plan for our community? Does it reach a point where SEDCO will weigh in on it, because it does more than just build something, and lay that out clearly? I think that we're going to find ourselves in a position pretty quickly where not getting an endorsement from us is going to feel like a major poke in the eye, when it's not a matter of us blessing projects or not blessing them. We're looking at them from a different perspective. And I just think we need to be really clear about that. And when we're asked by the council, by developers who we say yes to or no to, we're able to say, here's the process that we go by when we consider these things.
Alan, and before, so thank you, Travis. Alan, before we let Andrea talk about, could you just very quickly mention what your, not that it was a concern, but what your comment was about, you know, I think the first thing that got thrown out during that conversation was checklist. And, you know, you had brought up a concern that you had in terms of sort of the legal authority to have that. Could you just mention that again, just so that everyone's aware of it?
I believe that what I was trying to get at the time was the fact that if we go ahead and we have a checklist that says we should talk about this thing, this thing, this thing, or this thing, or make sure that we include it, I merely said we should make sure that we have some kind of legal or our legal representation look at it to make sure that we're not contradicting any other of the ordinances or zonings that we have in place, where we could get ourselves in trouble because we said we want to do this for this development, but we don't want to do it for this other development because of a checklist item,
Yeah.
only to find out that we put ourselves in a position where we, you know, potentially either put ourselves or the town in trouble because we did not represent our zoning and ordinances correctly.
Okay,
So I look back at when Chamberlain tried to put in Dunstan Crossing. And the town said no, and then they took us to court and they won. And that's because we didn't follow our own plan back at that time. I wasn't in town at the time, so I don't know all of the, you know, the background on it, but I just know that I don't want us to put us in a position where we get the town in trouble because we put together a list that can't be validated legally in court. That's all.
okay. And that might be something that you can talk to Rick about.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's beautiful having an attorney on the board.
Okay, well, thank you, Alan. Thank you, Travis. Thank you, Paul, if you're still listening. Final item, and we've got about 10 minutes left, is the strategic plan update from Andrea, and Kevin, if you'd like to.
Sure. So I am continuing to kind of do some behind the scenes work. We have been in hopes of having the strategic plan workshop with this group at our next meeting. Karen, I forget, what is the date of that? I don't have it right in front of me.
Same time, third week of,
21st.
thank you.
The what,
April
the 20, the
April 21st.
21st? You
Yes.
said, okay. And we're gonna have someone we'll have a facilitator for that, just to kind of walk us through. I guess what would be helpful is, I mean, what I'm hearing now is maybe looking not just at the future of this board, but maybe some guidelines for this board as well. And I think we can work on how to kind of create some dialogue around that at the meeting. I just want to make a comment that, you know, I support what Paul says. We want to be supportive of projects and of development that falls in line with our purpose and our mission. I feel that we have been very consistent with this particular project from the beginning. And I think that I don't feel bad about continuing to provide that support. And I think that it is important that this board stay true to its mission, but it also has a voice. And even if that voice gets diluted by the receiver, I think it's important that we continue to have a voice. So I don't want us to not do our job as a board and make sure that we continue to provide that support. I do think defining that support is important, and I think that's part of our role with the strategic plan. Because as Tom said, these are different times than when the strategic plan and our mission was, really defined 10 years ago. So I just think that it is good to be revisiting it, making sure that we have the guide that provides that path to projects and economic development. So.
Right. And so we're going to be sending you a series of documents so that you'll have them. We'll do that really later tomorrow, just because it's going to take some time to go through. One is the old strategic plan. One is the some of the policy guidance documents. Like, believe it or not, this was I think I included it in this. This was the public policy guidelines that were adopted by the board in 2007. I think mostly around that decision that the board took to oppose the casino. So I don't find it particularly helpful in terms of where we are now, but it's good to know what they looked at back then.
Yeah.
But I do think there's a lot more issues for us to contemplate, and I think that's we could probably spend most of that April meeting really understanding our role in both of those pieces, like organizing people to speak versus making that position clear from the SEDCO board perspective. And it's two different things, and I certainly appreciate what Paul is saying about that. But it is one of those things I have to admit where I am always a little concerned about it appearing that SEDCO is rabble rousing, I think is Tom's perspective. But I hear what Paul's saying is.
But again, I think it's we as much as we want to be mindful of the receiver of that message, it is important for us to continue to be that objective economic development voice.
Agreed.
Yeah, I completely agree. Look, I think, all due respect, I think to what Paul said, I hear it. I completely agree. But I think SEDCO should continue to do what it's charged to do and support things or oppose things and make that support or opposition known.
Right.
But I also can very much understand what he is saying, that it is probably not shocking to the council when SEDCO supports something, and at that point, they are probably looking looking to see overall town support or opposition, as well. And I don't, so I think we can do both.
Yep.
I think we can show our support while also trying to see if there's other support that we can get to the council. And I don't think necessarily someone needs to get up, Karen, and say, I'm a small business owner and I was asked to come here to speak by SEDCO.
Yeah, we don't want that.
No, we don't. No. But I think,
That's a no on that.
no, that's what I'm saying, that, I think if we get people there, they're there. And I think for someone to come back and say SEDCO was trying to, make this happen. Well, that's not true. This is someone that came and spoke, so.
So I think that there's a level of advocacy that's not rabble rousing, but it is, we make a decision, we alert our membership that we have come to this decision for the following reasons. The SEDCO board has voted to endorse adjusting the GMO because this is the vision that you've told us you want. We're going to let the town council know if you're interested in participating. The town council has said that they would love to hear from residents and businesses.
That's what I mean.
Asking them to say anything.
Yeah.
But we're letting them know this is important. You've asked us to advocate for this. If you want to be engaged, this is the time and place to go to.
Yep.
I mean, I think honestly, as much as we're not representing businesses as much as Scarborough Community Chamber is representing businesses,
Yes,
right?
yeah.
So I think, that is not our role to be asking businesses because we don't represent them necessarily. So
Yeah.
we
Right.
support them, but we don't represent them, so.
Right.
Yeah.
But it
But
is.
anyway, so I think I'm looking forward to a good session in April and we'll I think it will really help us create some a good road for us. So
And that's gonna be a workshop, so,
yeah.
easygoing and
And I don't think we'll have any other agenda items, John, or
Correct.
it's just for that session. Okay.
yeah.
I just want to think about time. So I just,
Exactly, exactly.
okay.
And I think we were talking about doing it in the 8 to 9:30 session time.
Yeah.
And I say, let's start with that. If we need another session, we do another session.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think Andrea has suggested we want to finish by the end of the year, so we've got time.
Yeah.
And, I think this issue that we just talked about is there's a lot of discussion on how that can get implemented and discussed. So I think there's a lot of good stuff there.
Right, anything else? Andrea, thank you very much. Alan, anything to add before we adjourn?
Happy St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah, right.
Oh, I'm wearing green. I didn't even realize it.
I was gonna say Kevin and I are all in.
I'm wearing green.
All
We're
right,
all in
well,
on St. Patrick's Day.
I have to
That is-
apologize to all my Irish brethren because when I packed to come up here, it was a week ago and I wasn't thinking at the time. So unfortunately, I didn't bring any.
Oh, all right. Well, just this once, and because you're on video, we don't get to pinch you, so. just say it.
Well, it is 9:32, so a motion, can I get a motion to adjourn?
So
Seconded.
move.
Second.
All right, well,